The following content has been provided by RWTH, Aachen University.
Okay, before we start with safe data and talking a little bit about system view controllers, I want to remind you that the first seminar meetings will start next week. So the first groups should be ready next week, directly after the lecture. So we're doing 1 hour lectures next week, and then we will talk about similar topics for the week afterwards. So it's just an insight. So the first thing we're going to talk about is how to save data persistent on the device. Philipp showed you last week how to do this table view controller, and he basically filled up the table always with the data set which is in the code, so this will be always the same. If you remove it, it's always gone. So when you close an app, usually your data is gone, so you have to save them somehow. And iOS allows you to do that in several ways. One way, which is the easy way, which we'll go through today, is to save that in some kind of data storage like JSON or XML format. So basically in a file which is in the domain space of the app itself. So basically write it to an XML file, and you can use that in your file as well. Another thing is you can use Core Data, which is a data storage framework which allows you to do more structured and managed data types. You can actually create some kind of class diagrams in there, and you can use this to store complex data where you don't want to do that in JSON on your own, XML on your own. And you can always save into a database or iCloud, which is another option. But these are usually the 3 types. And as I already said, so saving into a normal file is for small configurations. You don't want to store gigantic information in there because it gets very unstructured, because you have to structure it on your own. However, the typical thing when you want to use that is these kind of property lists. They are property lists. This is the file extension is called plist. If you ever see that it's already on Mac, quite often used for configurations, but also for storing basic information. And this is a typical view of the property list. And this is actually in every project that you have in Xcode, you have these property lists already where the configuration of your application is stored. I will show you later in the demo where you can see them. And a plist is basically a specific XML file. And if you would open it in a normal XML editor or in a normal text editor, you will see you have like basically an XML style with key value, and you can have different levels and of these things. So very simple way to store information. And to store data, you need a converter that takes your data structures to convert them in some kind of like this list encoder. And there we will use today the property list encoder. But there are multiple other encoders like the JSON encoder. We'll talk a little bit about this, but they work in a very similar way. They just convert the data into a different format so it can actually fit into your data structure that you create. So to store data, so every time you want to store data for a class or structure, to be able to store it, you need to implement the Codable Protocol. And this is basically a simple protocol which has these 2 functions: the init, so basically when you load from an encoded data set, and when you want to encode it. So you have to have like some kind of conversion functions, load and save. Basically have to implement that every time you edit this thing. Exactly. And you have to make sure that all of your substructures that you have, for example, you have a struct which contains another struct and another struct, they all have to fulfill the basic Codable Protocol. Otherwise, you will not be able to encode these things, and the encoding mechanism will fail in a way. However, the good news is that almost all types that you have in Swift that we talked about so far, like strings, ints, doubles, but also more complex data structures like dates and data, they are already all fulfilling the protocol. So you don't have to write your own encoder function for a string, for an init, so you can basically use them in a way. And you also have for collections like arrays and dictionaries, if they're from the normal type, for example, if you have an array of strings, this is automatically codable in a way, so you don't have to do anything here. You just can encode this thing. So let's have a look at a basic demo how it looks like. So let's say we have a structure which is a node, and it has a title, a text, and a timestamp. And what I may have to do to make it codable, I just have to add the keyword Codable Protocol in there. That's all I need to do. I don't have to implement any other function to make it encodable or codable of that. The reason for that is because it contains just typical normal data structures that you already know, so they are already codable. However, if you would have included, for example, more complex things like generics, we'll talk a little bit about this next week, then you have to implement these functions because the compiler will say, okay, there are some kind of data structures in your own structure which I don't know how to transfer to byte string, so I have to convert them. So what I'm doing here is I take the structure and now I create a new version of this structure, new node, and to basically encode this, I can just call this property list encoder. So I'm set the property list encoder. I'm say, okay, try property encode this file. So basically, what this line says, okay, I'm trying to convert this node here into an encoded version that I can just write in a file. However, we didn't talk about this try. We talked a little bit about this, but not in detail. We'll go a little bit into error handling. Because what could happen is that this can go wrong, because maybe the structure I want to convert is not codable, or I missed something, or the codable system cannot be initialized for some particular reason. So we talked a little bit already about error handling, and usually error handling is done when you have some issues, when you want, for example, when you write data, it always can happen that you have errors, because it could be that the data is not there, that you don't have access to the hard drive, or that maybe the storage is full. So you always have to think about do this. And Swift follows the basic concept that you probably know from Java and other languages, like the typical do, try, catch syntax that you've seen. However, you also have the short version, which is basically a try. So what does that mean? So when I have to use this try thing? And basically, we talked already about this little keyword, this throw keyword. The throw keyword basically indicates that something could go wrong while performing that function. For example, this function can create something, and it could be that this object or the string cannot be created because I don't have access to the hard drive or to this space somewhere. So it could be an error. And every time you have a function that you see that has the throw keyword, you have to catch, you have to use this do, try, catch error mechanism. Otherwise, the compiler will tell you, okay, here something can go wrong. You have to prevent the error, because if you don't prevent the error, the system will crash, or the application will crash in this case. So, and you can actually see what kind of errors. Usually you have this structure that you have an enum, and you have these different error codes that could happen. For example, when you want to write a file to the hard drive, could say, okay, no access to the hard drive, or storage full. So these can be errors, and you can handle them in a different way. And the typical method is that you have this function that says throw, and then you can basically guard these different errors. So this is a function that you can write, and you can throw these different errors. Let's say you can throw this error, can want to return a string, but as soon as you go through these guard statements, you can actually initialize these different errors that you define. Let's say the error number 1 is hard drive is full. You can say, okay, in this case, when I unwrap this option here, up here, it could go say, okay, the hard drive is full, so I want to notify the developer, okay, this is the error I want to get in. So this is the typical pattern that you probably have seen in Java already. So this follows this basic concept of do, try, then you have the expression and the statement, and then you have these different catch parameters that you can collect. Let's do this in a practical thing. So for example, I want to have this function here. I know that this function can throw an error, and then I can do, if error number 1 is filed, I want to react to the error number 1, maybe say, give a notification to the user, okay, sorry, I cannot save anything because the hard drive is full. Or if you don't have access, you can ask for permission to get access to the hard drive, something like that. So you can react to these different errors if different errors are thrown. However, you can also ignore all of this and say, I don't care if an error occurs or not. I just want to be noticed if an error occurs. So don't care what kind of error. I can use the short version by try. And basically this keyword says, okay, try to fulfill this function or run this function. If something goes wrong, I don't really care. I just say, okay, return the data. So I cannot have different error handlings. However, this is basically an if statement saying, okay, fetch data from the disk. In this case, if everything is all right, it returns data. If not, I'm trying to get something from the server. And if it's not correct, then and at the end, I will just return null. However, here I cannot react on different errors. I'm basically assuming, okay, something goes wrong. I don't care why, because maybe I don't have any network connection, but I cannot even do anything about this, because if I cannot get the data, I have to handle this in a different case. So with these try question mark things, you can actually create a guard statement or an if statement that allows you to catch these things. However, you can also force a try function. So in this case, you can actually say, with this option, you can actually disable the throw and catch mechanism. What happens here is I'm saying, okay, I'm gonna load an image, and I'm forcing that option. What happens here, if the image is not there, the application will crash. However, if you really know that the image is there, you can actually prevent the error message to be a little bit more optimized. For example, this happens a lot when you actually at the end of your application and you know that the image is in your bundle and you're 100% sure the image is in your bundle, you can use this try force thing to know, okay, this is definitely there. I know that a loading image function always is a try catch error, but I ignore this to optimize your code by a little tiny fraction of computational power. So this is the basic error handling. And now we are at the state where we said, okay, I'm creating this property list and I'm encoded. And at this point, I already have this encoded node. So I have a container which is a kind of a byte string that encodes my structure node. To decode this, I can do the same thing the other way around. Instead of using the property list encoder, I'm using the decoder in this case. And this is basically this same approach. So I'm using, first of all, set up the property list decoder, which is a singleton class that you just grab. And then I'm trying to decode the message again from this type, because I have to define the type. And I'm using the decoded mode that I just did. And this should work pretty fine. So now, at some point, I can decode and encode, have a decode and encode mechanism. Now I have to write this somehow to the hard drive. And for this one, we already talked a little bit about this. iOS apps are usually sandboxed, so you don't have any access to any specific root folder on your application. You don't have any folder structure. You only have access to a specific disk area inside your application. And this is basically the document dictionary that you can access. So basically, every application has some kind of folder inside the application, which can be used to store data that you can access as basically one particular folder. And you can access this by this call here. And this is basically the file manager is also a class allows you to do that. And what you're doing is you take the document dictionary and you use user domain mask, which is a keyword, which can be explained. And I'm just taking the first element that appears in this search. At some levels, you can have multiple of them, but just for the sake of this, we just use the first one because it's usually quite easy to look for this. The file manager looks for this specific object. And then before I can actually write to a file, I need to get an URL of the file or create a file in this case. And I can basically say, okay, get me the document dictionary, append the path component. So basically, this is the file name, the node test, and then I can append the path extension. So now with this call, I'm basically creating an URL to a specific file in my documentary folder. However, the file is not there yet. I'm just having a specific URL. And then I basically can say, after I'm done, I can just say, okay, I have my URL, everything worked out, the file manager didn't work out. And then I can use basically say, okay, write to the file, again with a try, because we are now writing to the hard drive. of the phone and the encoded node. And I'm saying, okay, this archive URL, which I defined here, with an option no file protection. Here you can actually say, give a password to that file. And if this is done, the file is actually created at that point when this does not throw any error. So with this, you can actually then write the file in this format on the hard drive, and you can actually access this. So read from the file, same way. Here again, you decode the message again. You say, okay, first of all, I want to get my data from hard drive and say, okay, I want to have a data container, which is a class, basically a class for byte strings. And it can load from any kind of URL or for anything. So it's basically a byte container with some kind of functionality in there. And I say, okay, I want to have the contents of this particular URL, which I already created beforehand. And then I'm basically decoding the message from this thing. And this is basically all you need to do if you want to have a simple read and write function here. For this one, I want to show you a little demo, and by extending the application that we did, or that Philipp wrote, last week. For this application, I'm not using the simulator, but I'm using my phone because I want to show you the camera later on. And this is just a quick hit. So basically what you can do, if you want to record the content of your phone or want to show something like that, you can actually use QuickTime. We'll just show you that. So I can just QuickTime player, open it up and say new movie. So the first thing is the Mac takes me as an input, but you can actually say, okay, I want to have my content of my phone, and so I can actually record directly from my phone. This is pretty nice to make videos. And this is actually a way, if you ever want to create a video interacting for the App Store, you can use this function to record data from. You can also say, okay, I want to have the audio from that phone, so you can actually record this live. And this works also in the developer mode, so if I compile something, well, now it lost the connection, but if I compile this application, so I have here, this is the emoji thing, and this is the application I'm just running with this thing. Okay, then let's start updating the application from Philipp to make it that we can actually store data longer than just running the application once. So the first step I need to do is to make this structure codable. Now you may be wondering, okay, why do I need to define this codable? Because every part of this structure is already codable because it's these substrings. However, what the compiler is doing, it checks just basically one level. So it cannot do doesn't make a recursive sweep through all of your structures there to check if it's codable or not. So every structure that you have to create, you actually have to add the codable definition. Otherwise, it will not work in this case. Theoretically, compiler could do that, but it doesn't do that for probably optimizational issues. So the first thing that we can do is to do the saving option. So, and I'm using the table view controller here, and I'm basically, first of all, I remove all the data that Philipp created to fill up the storage. So let's empty that. So let's run this. So what you see is, okay, file is empty because I didn't have anything in here. So the emoji array is empty. So let's say we want to save data. At which point we want to save data? We could do that every time we create a new object, or maybe that's not very efficient. So what we could do is to say every time the application will go inactive. So every time I close the application or every time I switch to a different application, I want to do a save option. And here you can go back to the app delegate, which is the main class, and here are these different callbacks that you can have. And I will use application will resign active. So here I will do the saving option. So this is called every time it is interrupted, the interaction is interrupted, so I can use this. So for example, here you see this method should be used for method to pause a game or something, because then something is becoming more active and the application goes in the background. So this is a good way to store data when you don't store it on the cloud, which you use more often. However, in this case, I'm just storing to the background. So however, the first thing I need to do is, because in our construction, we have all of the details. For example, the emoji array is not somewhere in a specific data structure, but it's actually in a controller. In a larger application, you would create some kind of model classes. However, you need to have some access to this thing. And to get this access, I need to have the link or a pointer to this particular navigation view controller. So, and to do that, I will set up a let, and to my window, which is the main window on top of my screen so far, and I'm setting up the root view controller, which is, as I already know, it's a UI navigation controller. And that just allows me to give access to my UI navigation controller. And so this is the navigation controller of our, let's look at the storyboard. This is basically this one here. So this is the first part, but now I actually need the second level here as well, because otherwise I cannot get access to that particular area I want to fill up. So again, let's call it emoji table controller, and this should be my navigation controller, and the view controllers on top of them. I know this is my first object. And here what I'm doing now is I say, okay, I know that this is a emoji table view controller. Yeah. So I'm forcing it, I'm casting it to that particular class because I know this is the class. This has always happened, so it will not crash because this is clear. So now I need to get the URL. So let's do get URL for my file, and document dictionary. Let's call it document directory, and I'm using the file manager. This is the default file manager, so this is basically an already initialized singleton that is accessible. There are some reasons where you can use multiple of them. However, in this case, for now, we just leave this one, and I'm using this function, so I'm saying URL where's the dot? So I want to have the document dictionary, and I'm using this in the user domain mask again, and I'm doing the first one here. And since this is an optional, I'm assuming in this case again, okay, this document dictionary exists, because it always exists. But however, if you ask for a different URL, it could be that it does not exist. So I'm doing a force unwrap here. Let's compile if something goes wrong. So let's create a new URL. This should be, again, document dictionary, append, and I'm naming this emojis, and append, doing a pass extension because I want to have a specific file name, and I call it the plist, so which is basically this one. So I have my URL, And then I'm taking I start the property list. Where is it? Use an encoder in this case. And now I'm encoding the emojis. Here in this case, I'm doing a try option. Is it taking this one? Should be this one, property list encoder. And I'm encode the specific value. And now I have my emoji table view controller, and this has this emoji array. So now I have encoded this thing, and I just have to write that to my hard drive. Try encoded emojis because it is optional. And then I'm doing the write command basically by doing this one and say, okay, this is my URL. Yeah, my dot is broken, I guess, finally. There. So now this is the whole saving operation that I'm doing. So every time I create an emoji, I can save this. Let's try that. Here's my application. Oh, clicking yes, and I'm taking the symbol, hello. And I'm just calling it something, I don't know. Description, I'm using also hello in this case. Let's say blah. So now if I would close this application or even shut it down, this is automatically saved. Now let's start this thing again. But this is still empty because we didn't load this. And now we have to do the loading part, and then basically we're already done with this thing. So the loading part I will write somewhere else. I will not write it when the application is started, because at this point, when the application is started, the table view controller that we created to fill up all the data where the object is, the array is there, is maybe not initialized. Because it takes some time, because the app delegate starts, and then the first view starts, the navigation view controller starts, and then the table view starts. So we would have to check in the app delegate, okay, is the table view there, is the table view there, so we need to have them. So we can just do it directly in the table view controller as soon as the table was loaded. And then we will just use the viewDidLoad method that we have here. And for this one, I will just copy the first part here because we don't can use the same option here. So because this is just for the URL. And the second part is then basically only similar to the other part. In this case, property list decoder. I'm taking the initialize my decoder in this case. Yeah, multiple keys are broken now. Let's call it data. And now I'm trying to catch this data type. And this is basically content of URL, but it can also be from other things. So the data storage container was called NSData in Objective-C. Is a very powerful class that basically helps you with everything when you want to convert something to byte string or back. URL, and then we use the same URL again. And since this is an F-flat, Yeah, let's do the decoded data directly in this thing as well. Try property list decoder and decode. What? What's wrong? Oh, I wrote the wrong decoder. Okay. This has to be this, otherwise I don't want to have an encoder, I want to have a decoder. Nice auto completion. So there we go. So again, this should be from the type emojis. Did I write it small? No. In self. So this is basically the type I define it should be encoded into, and then I say, okay, should be the data. And if this is true, then I'm basically saying, okay, self emojis should be, yeah, my decoded data. And that's it. Let's hope it works. Yeah, here's my hello container, and this is basically a very simple way how to store this thing. It's a lot of code, but it's basically straightforward to have just decoder and encoder in a different way. Let's go back to the slides. Where's my slides? Okay. As I already said, you also have other encoders like JSON encoders, which are built in the system, so you don't have to write your own JSON file. And it works in the same simple way you use the codable option in this case. However, you can also tweak the way how objects should be encoded or decoded. So maybe you want to have different keys in your JSON code, or you want to have a different structure that allows you to do a little bit easier to structure these things. So this is just the example for the JSON encoder, which is exactly the same thing. And instead of decode, you just write the JSON option, but it's essentially the same thing. So I already said when you have, for example, in this case, when you look at the XML file, you will see then you have these different variable names. So the key of a variable is always the name of the variable in this case. So it would be name, ID, favorite car. But maybe you want to change that. Maybe you want to have an XML file which is a little bit more easier to read or a different functionality. And here you can define basically the different types of the keys, how they should be defined. So in this case, I could say, okay, I want to have, for example, the ID should be in the XML file or in the JSON format, should not be just ID, it should be employer ID. And here you can actually define this enum inside your structure that gives you the option to choose what the coding key should be. In this case, and here you can define this. So it's a string and a coding key type. And here you can say, okay, and the ID should be employer ID. And from now on, every time you encode and decode something, the ID will be, the key for this ID will be employer ID. For the other ones, you have to name them here, because otherwise the system will say, okay, this is not complete. However, you can leave them out, say, okay, I want to keep the name, and I want to keep the favorite car name as a key component. So this is a way to make the XML file a little bit more readable without having to change your internal names of your variables. You can also manually define these things. As I already said, as I showed you before, we have this, let's go back 2 slides. So we have this particular structure here. We have the employer, it has a name and ID, and it has a favorite car. And the favorite car has just a string. And if you would typically encode that just using the standard JSON encoder, you would have something like this. You have the employer ID, the name, and then you have a favorite car. And since the favorite car is a new subclass, or it's a new structure, you would get something like this. You would have like another level in there. But maybe you want to have something like this here. So you want to have something like, okay, this should be just a car. So want to have it in a more compact structure inside my XML to make it a little bit more easier to read. So in this you can actually then write your own encode and decode functions in a way by defining these particular behaviors. Here you can actually say in this thing, so okay, this is the encode mechanism saying, okay, the container should be the coding keys here, and I want to encode the name. I want to encode the ID for this particular ID. And instead of encoding the second, my favorite car as another structure, I'm encoding basically just the parameter or the variable inside this thing by basically saying, okay, my favorite car should have the same key, but I just want to have this particular variable inside this thing. If this thing has multiple variables, you have to define them at all. But you have to make sure this has to be complete. Because as soon as you override these functions, you have to provide an encoding method for all of the parameters that are inside your structure. So you cannot just say, I just want to have the last part, because the other ones are like the default mechanism. And then the system will say, okay, this is not coding compliant because the encoded function does not contain all of the variables. So if you ever override the encoding function or implement the encoding function, you have to provide an encoding mechanism for all of your functions. So, and this is the other way around. So this is the decoding function here. And basically these are the same things. And in this case, instead of decoding these things, I have to have another try in here to the code for my favorite car. And basically at this point, I can initialize the structure again. So then you have to make sure that you initialize all of the substructures in the right way. So this is a very simple or basic introduction to how to save data. If you have more complex things, you should have a look at core data. Fortunately, we don't have a seminar this year about core data, don't we? I'm not sure. This is a more structured way. Maybe we show later on just a figure. This is basically where you can define different classes and gives you a little bit more than just a couple of property lists. So the second part of the lecture, I want to talk a little bit about specific system view controllers that exist. So specific functionalities that you use a lot in a lot of apps, but you don't want to write on your own. So common system interfaces that, for example, will give you access to the camera, give you access to the photo library or maps, or let's say email and a web browser. And typical system view controllers are the activity control, Safari, some alerts, UI image picker, and mail composer. So it allows you to hook into specific functionalities of the system by using standard applications, and you don't have to write your GUI for these things. Because basically, if you want to take the camera, you don't want to write the camera function on your own. You want to have just a hook into the camera application. You could write the camera caption on your own, but this is probably not very useful if you want to just take a picture of yourself or something. So for this one, I will show you later on I will show you a demo. So first of all, this is the activity controller. This is, for example, for using when you want to share an option. So this is basically the share button in Twitter. This is when you have a photo that you want to share, where you can copy something, send it to email. So here you can take a content from your application, specific content, and transform it or share it to anything. So URL. This. You have the Safari view, where you can actually launch a Safari dedicated to specific websites. So you can actually define, okay, if I click on this link, this should go to a specific website. It's also pretty common that you see in Slack applications or in Twitter as well. Then you have this URL alert controller, where you can actually define these alert buttons that can pop up from the bottom. And here you can, for example, access the image picker, which gives you access to your image library, or directly to the camera. This is commonly used in WhatsApp and other applications that gives you these defined access controls. And then you can also say, I want to have this mail composer and define a mail, which is often used in applications where you send an email to a specific URL. So you can define basically first parts of the text. You can define the sender, the receiver, and some of these functionalities to provide like a customer email support system. So we will go all through these things in a demo. For this one, I have to go back. Let's switch back to the screens. So what I did here is I created already a simple interface, which I will show you now. So this is basically an image, and I have set up a couple of buttons, but they don't do anything. They are not connected to anything so far. They are just connected to these 4 functions here. So the share button, and I will implement these functionality in there so you don't have to watch me implementing stuff, which is quite simple. So the share button is basically, for example, I take a picture or my application has a picture I want to share to someone. With this, I can basically, for example, I want to make the picture in my application, I want to send it to Phil or to my computer or something like this one. And in this case, since we want to take the image first, we have to check if the image already exists. To show you that where the image is, this is basically a static view, and it's connected to an IB outlet, which is the image view. So nothing fancy here. So let's check if there's an image. This is the image view, and if it contains an image, else I'm just returning. So this is just to make sure that there's an image that I can actually share. So then let's have a look at the activity controller. So let's set up the activity controller. This is a UI activity view controller. And the first parameter I give is basically, or I say, it's the parameters that I want to share. So basically here, this is an array of any, as you see, an array of any objects. So it could be a text, it could be something that is currently in my pasteboard, it could be multiple images. Here you can actually define what kind of container you want to share. This can be anything. In our case, it's just an array of which contains just the image. That's all we need so far. And this is basically nil because it's not that important so far. So, and what I have to do now, as soon as the button is hit, I want to have this popover presentation controller, which basically says, okay, I want to have this popover on top of my view, and it should be on top of my view, and let's say sender. What did I do here? Oh, okay, this should be the sender. Because this is the button view where I got my information from here. And then I'm saying basically, okay, present. This is the view controller, the activity view controller. It should be animated. And what should happen if I download it? Nothing should happen so far. I'll stop pulling this thing. So here now I can say, okay, I'm clicking the share option, and here I can then, since it's depending on the typical type that you have, since now this is an image, I could share it to my apparently Ali, if he's you're like in this thing, but I can send it to a message, or I can send it via Twitter, or the options that you can configure. But I can also say, okay, save it as an image. So this is the option that I have here. I can copy it, and I can paste it somewhere, and as soon as the action is good, this function basically says, okay, nothing should happen after I'm completing this thing. So this is the very simple sharing option where you can actually define these things. So let's have a look at the Safari button. Here again, let's define an URL. See, let's take the Apple address, and if this is correct, then because an URL is always optional because it could go wrong, that the string I gave is not a specific URL, so I have to put it in here. And again, I can Safari controller, and this is then called SF. And then I can basically initialize it with an URL, just this URL, and then it's again the same code as here. Instead of having the activity controller, I'm just using this particular controller. Let's see what happens. And here you basically then pop up this option and you get this done option that you see. So you're not switching the different app, but you're basically loading a Safari web view in your own view, and then you can go back and then you're basically on top of this thing. So this is another option that you have. Let's do the email one first because it's the easier one, and then we will end up by looking at the camera option, which is a little bit more complex. So, did I have to initialize something before? No. Oh yeah, for email, you have to fulfill a specific protocol. That's why I need to enable this mail protocol here. It's the control U delegate. So let's say mail composer. So I want to send, for example, an email with a specific text to a specific URL. Maybe I have an application and it has a bug and want to say a ticket to someone. So I can basically define the email with some text before actually that the user don't have to text all of these info. So mail view controller, compose view. Now I can basically define what happens. So mail should poser can be self. However, this is not that important so far. So now I can basically define these things. So let's say mail composer set the button set, and here you can see I can actually define all of these different parameters of that email. Set the recipient. It should be to, it's again an array. I can say to example@apple.com or something like this. And I can say, okay, it should have a set subject. Could be user X, Y, Z, and set message body. So you can actually write already some predefined text. Say hello, and this should be HTML. So you can actually already include graphics if you want to, and complex emails. So let's do that not. And then now I need to present this view controller again. Let's do the whole thing again. Copying this function here, and instead of run this. So going back to this one here. So I'm setting up my email. I don't want to send this right now. So now I'm kind of like in a weird state because now I'm stuck a little bit into the email configuration because I switched to in this case I switched a little bit to the different app. How do I get back? And this is the call I did here. So I'm basically saying, okay, this should happen if I'm canceling or sending the option. So now what happens here is if I set this delegate can inform me that okay, you're done with the message, let's go back to my view. However, this is currently not implemented. I need to implement a function that says basically that says as soon as the user is done, let's say cancel the email or send the email, let's dismiss this mail view composer because I want to go back to my application. And for this one, we have to implement another function, mail composer, exactly this one. See if this is the right one. I always mix them up. Yeah, this is the right one. So this is basically a function that gets a callback from the mail application back to my code. And here I'm basically just have to make sure that this option is dismissed. And this is basically very simple by just using the dismiss option. No, not metal. And doing this. So this is a function call that is set in the delegate method. And let's run this again. And email. And here you see now I dismissed the view so I can go back to my application. So you see a lot of these multiple of these controllers are just not dismissing them automatically, but they have to have like a back function that needs to go allow me to go back. So let's do at last the more complex part is the camera. And for this one, I need to first to use the UI image. Very long name, UI image picker controller delegates. So what I want to have here in this application, so in this case, let's say this is the typical thing when you have in an application, when you want to send a photo or when you set up your image, saying, and it should be allow you to choose either from your photo library or it should be allowed to take a picture directly. So these are the two options that you usually have in this case. And for this one, we don't have to just give the system access to the camera, but we also have to have this activity menu that I showed you before. So it actually allows us to choose between these different options. And that's why this is a little bit more complex. So where is it? So first thing I have to do is set up the image picker again, so I can actually receive a particular image that I selected. Image picker controller. And so this is triggered, and the image delegate. So the image should be selected, and I receive the information. Yes.
With the email button, can I also delegate to a third-party app? Or?
No. You can the scope of you mean the delegation. So you will not have access to a different application. So what you could do, you can say, okay, a different part of my code should react to the email composition. So for example, you could say, okay, the user should send an email, and then I want to have a totally different view appear. And this view should react to when I'm done with my email. But you will not be able, because the option in there in this code is particular, the scope of your application cannot go beyond the scope. There are some ways where you can hook in extensions that allow you to to go into a different application state at some point. But this is very, very restricted. And it works in a different way. Maybe we'll show that sometime, that you can actually have these extensions that allow you to do a hook into other things. But in this case, you're basically bound to your context scope. So you could say, in most cases, the part of your code that starts the email conversation or of these things go back to the same option. But for example, if you say, okay, the user should send an email in something, and then it should go to a totally different view, then you can say, okay, it should be actually something different. But I would assume in 95% of the cases, you go back to yourself. The same thing with this thing here. Then let's start. Oh, what is wrong? Why does it not do that? Should be self. Let's fix that. Okay. Let's see what happens if I start this. If it crashes or not. Maybe I forgot. Oh, it crashes. Oh, I forgot the image navigation controller to set up. Okay. Another protocol. Because we want to have this navigation part. So basically the pop-up menu, which allows me to choose if I want to use the photo library or if I want to use the camera, this has to fulfill this same thing. So now I can basically get rid of this. And this should work now. Stop my application. Built successfully, yes, finally. Good. So then let's set up the photo library. Let's set up this menu that I want to show. And for this one, this is called the alert function. So these are these different views. And let's set up the alert controller. And the title of this thing, so this is the function here. The title should be, let's say, choose image source. I want to show a message, and should be this action style, so basically should pop up these particular views. So now I want to set these, I'm defining basically the different views I want to have here. I want to have a cancel option, I want to have a camera option, I want to have the photo library option. So let's start with the cancel option. Cancel action should be UI alert action, and it should be, again, should be have a title, should have the cancel type, it should be handled. Nothing should happen with this setup. So this is the part here. And I actually can already show what happens. So let's set this up so we can actually fill it out. So I'm setting alert controller should have this particular action. So what I'm doing, I basically have this alert controller which defines me the view, and I'm adding these UI actions in there. So cancel action should be in here, and now I'm doing again the popover controller. Source view is again the sender, which is dude, and then I'm basically at the end I say present my alert controller with animation, and nothing should happen here. Yeah, my dot is really broken. So, should now see here, so as soon as I click the camera option, I get this pop-over menu. It has this particular title, so the name I set, and I have so far a cancel button. So this is the alert information that I can get, and now I can fill it up with the rest. So when I press the cancel button, I can already close this again. Or I can also do something like click somewhere else, so if I don't want to have these options, I can click somewhere else. So now we want to have the camera, and then we will do afterwards, we will do the image picker. So basically that I can browse through your image folders. So let's do the camera action. This is again controller. Should have again a title. Let's call it camera. And it should have, what's going on? No, this is the wrong function, sorry. No, it's not a controller. Damn, autocompletion. That I want to have. So, camera, and it should have the default style. And now, I actually want to start the camera option, and here I'm using a little method, or it's a concept called a closure in this case, which we'll introduce tomorrow. So it's basically a lambda, something similar to a lambda function that you know from Java. Do you know lambda constructs from Java or blocks or something? So inline functions in this case, yes.
Yeah, where's the functionality of the cancel button, of the cancel action, because you only specified the style.
Yeah, I said handle nil, so basically what happens when it returns nil, nothing happens and it closes this thing. So when I click that button, actually nothing happens, and since after the action is done, this is the controller closes, so that's basically what I did. So, and here, so let's start. So basically, what I'm defining here is now in let me type that, and I will explain that later on. So this looks a little bit weird. So what I'm doing is basically I'm defining a specific action in this line of code, basically defining from this image picker, which I created here. I took the source type, and it has, this is an enum, basically defining defining this camera type, and I'm presenting this particular image picker. So I'm basically setting the image picker source to the camera, and this is basically then presenting the particular image picker at this time in an inline function. So what happens here is basically I'm setting up, okay, image picker should be the camera, and then I'm presenting like the other views, as I showed you before, with the camera view. And to add this thing here, I have to edit, controller add action, and what did I call it? Camera action, yes. So, come on. So now I have the camera option as well. However, when I click this, oh, it actually works. Okay, because, oh, damn, because I set already this up. So what you usually have to do, you have to give your application permission that you can actually use the camera. And you have to ask the user for a particular permission. And so this is the typical thing that you see when you install an app that want to take a picture that tells you, okay, you get an overlay message saying, this image, this want to give access to this thing. So basically, this is a resource management system. You can actually say, okay, Facebook should not use my camera, Facebook should not use my contacts. So this is something that you have to define in this thing. However, since I tested this already, this is probably already saved in your application. However, usually you define these options. Maybe I intentionally define this in this plist configuration. And usually what should actually happen is that at some point when you didn't define this option, your application just crashes. It does not give you access to your file. It just crashes because it does not have this information, because it denies this request. And to give permission to these things, you can actually add this here. This is really hard to see, but what was the zoom function? So let's go a little bit closer here. I'm zooming in. And here you can actually define, navigating through this. So, and here you can actually define these permissions. And in this case, it's so you can say, okay, and here are some permissions. For example, this is the privacy issues. And I want to say, okay, for example, when you have a map thing, you have to give permission to allowing the user or the system to access the app, the maps. And in our case, we want to have the photo. What is the name? It's a long name. No, it's a camera actually. So the first one is the camera option. So you define this key, and then you can define the question. And here, what you can write is basically the text that appears to the user when they get this overpower option. So let's say take a picture, but here you should usually say something, okay, this image, I want to have access to the camera because I want to take an image for this particular application. So basically, in this case, you explain what the user will see and how you can actually give permissions to these applications. And you can actually then, if you go back to your phone and to go to the options, you can actually take away these permissions again. And then it will ask again. Let's do the other permission as well. So I want to have also access to the library, to the photo library, and here you also have to give permission to the photo library. And photo library has actually two permissions. In this case, I just want to use photos, but you want to add something. For example, if an application wants to add something to your photo library, you also have to give permission to that. So iOS is controlling all of your sensors, like the camera or Bluetooth, something in a very controlled way, but also this thing. So library usage, yes. So let's go back. So, okay. Start this thing again. So now I have this camera option and take a photo, and I could use this photo. But now, again, nothing really happens because we didn't implement yet the delegate method. So the photo's taken and it will be sent somewhere, but I'm not receiving or not reacting so far to the image that I just took. For this one, we also have to implement, where's my cheat sheet? Exactly, there it is. I have to add another function that actually takes the image and does something with the image. So let's write this. So this is the function I want to use, and is that the right function? Yeah, I want to take the selected image from this info string that I have, and then you have to use this very long image controller. Original image. Yeah, very long name. What's wrong with this? Oh yeah, it's an if condition, sorry. So what I'm doing, I'm taking the extracted image from this info thing, and this is usually stored when I select this image in this variable type here, in this info string. So it's a dictionary at this particular place at the dictionary. The key of that dictionary key where my image is UI image picker controller origin image. Yeah. And now I can basically say, okay, I want to take that image and place it on the image view I just created. I have in my application. So image. Selected image, and then I can dismiss again the overview. Again, taking image of Philipp. Oh, sorry. So there's it, Philipp. And I can use this photo, and this is now stretched into this thing. So this is how you can use this in a way. Okay, so this is this part, and now we have to just finalize. So we can take an image, but we want to do the same thing again by taking something from our photo library. So where is that one? Yeah, okay. So this is, let's put that there to make it a little bit. So it's very similar to the camera action. In this case, it's photo action, and your alert action is again this whole thing. It's that's how call it photo lib should be the default style. And again, now we have to the similar action. I'm just copying this thing and basically just replacing one small part. Instead of selecting the camera here, I can just say I'm selecting the photo library. Okay, this is too much. So basically, code is entirely the same. Instead of using this camera source, I'm basically saying, okay, the image source should be my photo library. And again, I have to add this here. How did I call it? Photo action. So camera, I have my photo library, and now I can basically select, let's select me, and now you can choose this from the photo library in the same way. So very simple combination, and you have this functionality already in there. So this we are already done for today. So these are some standard controllers, so you don't have to implement the whole taking pictures functionality again. So you can use these standard controllers. There are more of these ones, but these are the most commonly ones, the action list. You can also define, if you want to have these alert lists, you can actually use them for your own case. So you don't have to have specific or use system view controllers in there, but you can also define your own list of alert controllers to give like your application a certain meaning. So you can actually define, let's say I want to have a functionality where I want to push this up as some kind of UI element which should be different from the rest. Okay, with this, we're done for today, and we will continue tomorrow with closures and a little bit more complex stuff. All right, thank you.
This content was provided by RWTH, Aachen University.